she witnessed the carnage of war and the frailty of the human body. So that's my association with those in my family that have served in defense and assistance to our nation. With that being said, we have noted speakers tonight. So tonight we have veterans that have served our nation and defended our nation. But before we bring up our speakers, let us have those that are veterans please stand so we may acknowledge you with a round of applause. Thank you for your service, one and all. So, memories are what these veterans have with them. And some of us, I was not in the armed forces, had a draft card. President Nixon released the draft. I graduated from high school, go to college to get college credits, come home, work for my father, and then become a member of the Roundup community. So the stories they have are the sharing of the carnage and also some of the things that they did in their careers as they were in service to our nation. So first of all, we have Kim Kazara. Secondly, Lauren Matthews will share the memories of Isaac Zahn. And then Mary Rose Beasley will share the memories of a soldier's mother, Sharon Spicer, mother of Isaac Zahn. So at this time, would you please welcome Kim Kazara to the microphone as he shares his memories of being a veteran.
First of all, I'd like to thank Pat for emceeing this organization for a meeting, and it's a pleasure to be here to visit with you briefly this evening. I was told I was supposed to spend 10 minutes. I don't know if I can manage that or not. I could go on for hours and hours telling you about things that I did that happened to me while I was in the military. But briefly, I joined the United States Air Force in May of 1966. I'd been going to college at Eastern, and I was taking a calculus class, and I had a straight A average in it, and the guy gave me an F. And the reason he said he did that was because I only had a 20% attendance. And I was a bad influence on the other kids. At any rate, I figured if that was the case, I probably should get out of college and maybe do something for the country. I don't know that there was any big patriotic drive that caused me to do that, but I always was brought up to feel that you kind of had a duty to serve your country, and I always liked airplanes, so I thought, well, the USAF would be the place to go, and that's precisely what I did. I was really fortunate throughout my career. I spent 4 years on active duty, and I had permanent duty stations at Altus, Oklahoma, and then at Lockbourne, Ohio. But I really didn't spend much time at either place. I basically traveled all over the world with our air crews, and most of it I saw from 40 or 50,000 feet, and transit barracks and runways is about all I got to see of the world, other than some time in jungles in Southeast Asia. Of course, anybody that's familiar with the military, you know that your original pay grade is what they call an E1, enlisted 1, and the top pay grade is E9, which is Chief Master Sergeant. And I spent 4 years on active duty and got off active duty as a staff sergeant, which is an E5, and then I joined the Montana Air National Guard in Great Falls. And I retired from there right at 21 years ago with 30 some odd years of service. And I retired as an E9, which is the highest enlisted rank that you can achieve. Incidentally, by law, by federal statute, only 1% of the entire enlisted force of all the U.S. Military can hold that rank at any one time. So you're really, you know, kind of in some good company, I guess, if you're in the 1 percentile. And so I was really fortunate at that. My job, I had an excellent job all the time that I was in the military. It was kind of a, I guess you could call it a management analysis type thing. My duty was to look at everything from administration to leadership, personnel, maintenance, operations, civil engineering, the whole 9 yards of a unit. And depending on, you know, their manning levels, authorized versus assigned, and all kinds of statistical information, you were supposed to make a judgment as to whether we could execute the war orders. In other words, if we, at that time, of course, the Soviet Union was our main adversary, and the war plans were all aimed at destroying Russia in the event that they tried to destroy us. And they had the, you know, the mutually assured destruction. In other words, we could bomb them to rubble and they could do the same thing to us, so nobody really wanted to start a war. And there were some pretty intense times. Then, of course, the Vietnam War was going on, or started back in those days, and there was a big buildup, you know, of people to serve there. And one of the curious things about it was that I think that the Congress had passed a law that limited the number of people that we could use, we could actually deploy to Vietnam during the Vietnam War, and I don't recall what the number was, but the way they got around that was they'd send us, some of us over there, what they called TDY, temporary duty, and you weren't really considered in the country unless you'd been there for 90 days or more. So you could go for 89 days and not be considered in the country, so they could beat the, you know, the limitation that Congress had imposed. So there was all kinds of tricks that they did in that. In my job, I was at 3 Corps headquarters at Pleiku for a while, you know, looking at bomb damage assessment and kind of taking pictures, and you know, studying what our B-52s and other aircraft did to the enemy, and it was not very pretty. I saw enough blood and guts over there to last me a lifetime, and to this day I'll swerve to miss a mouse on the highway because I just hate the thought of killing anything. That might be kind of dumb, but that's sort of the way I feel about it. In the National Guard, the Air National Guard, I was fortunate. I worked at on what they call the state headquarters staff, and there's you know, some of the higher-ranking people serve the Adjutant General of the state of Montana and Helena. Even though I spent some years in Great Falls with the fighter wing, but there again I got to, you know, fly in mission aircraft. And I'll tell you what, there's no feeling greater than being in the back seat of an F-16 accelerating when you're going vertical. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I got to actually play with the stick a little bit, you know, when I go on some of these trips. So this one time I was with this guy and we did that, you know, going vertical and then airspeed indicators climbing. F-16 is one of the few airplanes, it's not the only airplane that has more thrust than it weighs, so that's why you could, you know, go vertical and increase your airspeed. At any rate, we got up to, I don't know, 45, 50, 55,000 feet, something like that. And then you roll over and start coming down. And I was just really having a great time. The altimeters are sunlining like crazy. And And this guy that was actually flying the airplane, he says, they called me Joe up there. He says, Joe, you better do something here pretty quick or we're going to crash. And I said, well, I don't know what to do. He said, you want me to take the airplane? I said, please. And there's a real, well, what would I call it, deal there that when somebody, there's two people flying an airplane, and one, there's a pilot in command that's actually got the controls. If he gives that up, there's a formal acknowledgement of you've got the airplane or I have the airplane. And so that, you know, that guy, he probably would have let me crash the thing. Maybe not, probably not, but I didn't have a clue what to do to get us out of this dive. And, you know, he rescued the thing and we had a good landing. And in all but one case, I had an equal number of takeoffs and landings. I had one unintended exit from an airplane that I wound up with a fractured back that's been bothering me ever since. But I'm really fortunate. I had a great career, good people, and you know, just a few minutes ago they said, well, thank you for your service. That always kind of embarrasses me when somebody tells me that. And I'll tell you why. Is number one, nobody made me go in there. Nobody made me join. I knew what I was getting into pretty much when I signed the line, took the oath. The United States has the best trained, the best fed, the best housed, the best clothed, the best led, pretty much the best paid military in the world. And I owe the American taxpayer thanks for my service. They don't owe me a thing. So that's, you know, maybe a kind of silly way of looking at it, but that's the way I have it. At any rate, I thank you for this opportunity, and I hope everybody has an enjoyable and safe evening. Thank you.
Well, Kim, I think you did better than 20% tonight, so although you didn't do well in calculus because you weren't in attendance, I think by getting an E9 rating in the top 1% of the military means that you made it to the head of the class. Congratulations, Kim Kazara, okay? Okay, the second part of this presentation, I call upon Lauren Matthews to share the memories of a veteran soldier from the United States Marine Corps, Isaac Zahn. So, Lauren?
This is a partial life sketch of Isaac Zahn, as Pat said, and it's not his complete life story, but it started about the time of 9/11. So, and then he served about 11 years in the United States Marine Corps. When I think about this country and all that it provides me, and every citizen I think about, all the people that sacrifice their lives to make this life possible for us, from the dreamers that dare to dream of leading like-minded people into a rebellion to free us from British rule, to the more current Iraq and Afghanistan wars. There are 24 wars in total in our 246 years as a country. That's according to military.com. 646,596 U.S. troops have lost their lives to combat. 539,000 troops died due to combat-related causes. That's 1,185,596 people paid the ultimate price. My name is Isaac Zahn. I spent 11 years and 8 months in the service to the United States Marine Corps. I was medically retired as an E6 or staff sergeant, ending my service. During my service, I sustained injuries due to an explosion that led to the loss of my right leg below the knee. I was awarded the Purple Heart for these injuries. I completed 3 tours of duty in Iraq and 1 tour to Afghanistan with 1st Marine Division, 1st Combat Engineer Battalion, 3 tours with Charlie Company to Iraq, and 1 with the newly formed Delta Company to Afghanistan. I served from February 22, 2002 to September 13, 2013. I was hit by 7 improvised explosive devices, or IEDs, in Iraq, and 1 in Afghanistan, for a total of 8 times during my service. Besides my leg, I sustained a TBI, or traumatic brain injury. I suffer from PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, and a long list of other health issues. When 911 occurred, I was 21 years old and was working at the Rex Restaurant, Bar, and Grill in Billings as a chef. I remember coming to work only to find an empty kitchen, which for a kitchen is unheard of. Instead, I see the entirety of the work staff gathered around the television at the bar. The towers had been hit by the first plane. At this point in my life, I was admittedly ignorant to most of life outside my daily doings and had no idea what or where the towers were. But I sat there and watched along with most of the nation as we witnessed the tragedy unfold. When the media stations first made the statement that it was in fact a terrorist attack on America, I felt the urge or calling to serve. I quit my job and signed up with the Marine Corps the following weeks. I won't tell you any stories of the hell that is war, but I will say it was a very challenging part of my life. At times it was scary and other times dreadful. War turned a bunch of young boys willing to fight for something greater than themselves into stone-cold machines. War takes its tolls as it does, and we lost some of our brothers, and some of our brothers were badly injured. When people or civilians think of war, they think of bullets and bombs, explosions, tanks, warships, etc. What a lot of people don't know is that the fighting and the explosions will eventually stop. The sacrifice, sadness, and loss are all that remain, shared by all sides in the wake of war. Oftentimes, the ones that pay the heaviest prices are the ones not involved in the fighting. Unfortunately, the Marines or soldiers that go to war are not the only ones that share in this sacrifice for country. Worrying mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, wives, husbands, and children are left to their own devices to deal with the fact that their loved ones may not return home. When the fighting and the deployments are done and finished, another battle begins. A fight to maintain relationships with these same people. It says somewhere that 41% of marriages end in divorce due to conflict with the lingering effects on the soldiers from war. Relationships are heavily strained when the soldier comes back into the family dynamic. While the soldier was away, the spouses had to do everything on their own, becoming both the loving nurturer and the disciplinarian. The returning soldier, unfortunately, expects to pick up right where he or she left off. But the kids no longer recognize the soldier's role in hierarchy of these current situations. The family unit suffers together and alone during different times during the soldier's service, but none more so than the first few months returning home from a deployment. While serving in the Marines, I was lucky enough to serve with several people that weren't natural-born citizens and were serving to become citizens. Imagine that, signing up to serve, fight for, and protect at the cost of life and limb a country that promises you a better future. The fact that only 1% of U.S. citizens will sign up to serve their country, and here are men and women willing to serve just to get a taste of the life most take for granted on a daily basis. I, like all Marines and soldiers, have sacrificed to varying degrees. We suffered, shed blood, sweat, and tears while in the service of our country. My marriage, like so many others, ended in divorce. I continue to suffer daily with health issues and pain. However, even after all that my brothers and I have gone through and suffered through, I wouldn't change a single thing about my enlistment. Everything that happens in this world happens for a reason, and it made me the man I am today. Not every day is a bad day while serving, you just appreciate the good days. more when you are surrounded with the brothers you went through hell with. And everyone is laughing. I have made amazing friends and made relationships with stronger than blood bonds. I count myself fortunate to call myself one of the few that took a stand for my country in its time of need, to join the ranks of millions that have died to make this country the home of the free. According to America's Warrior Partnership, 22 to 24 veterans aged 18 to 64 commit suicide each and every day. 18 to 20 vets in the same age group die by self-injuries, that 40 to 44 veterans taking their lives every day. Although the fighting may stop, the war continues on for many that have served. Respectfully, United States Marine Corps, Retired Staff Sergeant Zahn.
Memoirs of Staff Sergeant Zahn. Our third presenter tonight is Mary Rose Beasley, who will come up here and share a soldier's mother's reflections. Sharon Spicer, the mother of Isaac Zahn. Mary Rose.
I'm reading this off the cell phone, so hopefully my glasses. As a mother of a Marine, I wanted to share what all mothers must feel. I was proud of my Marine. I knew my son Isaac on his first tour to Iraq. I knew it was going to be the first push on attack on Baghdad against Saddam Hussein in 2003. I knew it was dangerous, and I'm very grateful for the power of prayer and the comfort it can bring. I would listen to the news with mixed feelings, knowing my son was in the thick of it. I didn't hear from him for almost 2 months, so I didn't know if he was dead or alive or where he was. I worked nights at the hospital and finally got a message on my answering machine. He had called in the middle of the night due to the time change, told me he was all right. It was music to my ears. When I would get worried again after that message, I would play his message again and again. Coming home from one of his tours, he called me to tell me he was on American soil again. I cried like a baby. When I heard on his third tour to Iraq that he was injured and flown to the States, it was heart-wrenching. I imagined the worst, of course. It was hard to not be able to get much info on the extent of his injury, what was being done for him, not to be able to see him. His right heel had been smashed while driving from an explosion from an IED under his vehicle, which was in the front of the motorcade. He had surgery that fixed his foot finally after a long wait for swelling to go down. However, he continued to have extreme pain in that foot, but it didn't stop him from serving again in Afghanistan in 2010. After 5 years of suffering, he had his leg amputated. I can testify that he has sacrificed his health, mentally and physically, and so much more. It makes me very sad and even angry when people take for granted